Hello and welcome to Talking Aussie Books, a weekly podcast bringing readers and writers of Australian fiction together. I'm Claudine Tonellis. As an avid reader and passionate advocate for Australian fiction, I have made it my mission to spotlight local talent. So if you're looking for your next read or simply want to learn more about the Australian literary scene, this podcast is for you. Grab yourself a cuppa, sit back and relax. This episode is brought to you by HarperCollins Australia.
When I was offered the chance to interview today's author for Talking Aussie Books, I jumped at it. I thoroughly enjoyed Kimberley Allsopp's debut novel, a charming and witty rom-com, Love and Other Puzzles, so I was incredibly curious to read her second novel, Rise and Shine, released in June by HarperCollins. Listeners, I loved it. The book is framed as a rom-com for grown-ups, a marriage story that begins with a breakup, is tinged with tragedy, but unearths so many of the absurdities and oddities of life so as to keep us smiling and nodding with recognition. It's the work of a highly skilled writer who, in this case, is not only an author, but holds the slightly unusual position of being a publishing insider, having worked in publicity and marketing for HarperCollins for 13 years. It's quite the CV. Kimberly, welcome to Talking Aussie Books and congrats on Rise and Shine. You've been through this publication process once before, but I'm wondering, what is it like to go from being the one organising the publicity to being the one being publicised?
Look, it's terrifying, and I do not care for it. I much prefer doing all the organizing. I guess you get to be a little less vulnerable when you're doing all that kind of back office stuff. So I absolutely prefer that. It's such a difference from when I did Love and Other Puzzles because it was so much closer to the COVID times, and I was in Sydney, so I didn't do any events. Like, there were a couple of podcasts. I don't feel like I felt the release of the book as much. Like, I got sent a couple of cartons of beer and I had some drinks with friends in the backyard, and that was it. And it's definitely feels different with Rise and Shine, which is very exciting. But I go to events and I'm like, oh, I'll just do my own post-its, which is what we do for anyone that doesn't know, when you've got like bigger lines and you put names on there so names don't get misspelt in books. And it feels very weird for me, for anyone else doing that kind of thing. It's hard to switch between the two. And obviously I also work for the publisher that I am published by. So I am in the slightly cringy position of often being in meetings where the book will come up, or or sales, or what's happening. And so, I mean, that is a good thing about doing so much stuff remotely these days. At least I can jump off a meeting and then come back 10 minutes later, because I die. And it would look a lot weirder if I was running out of meeting rooms when they're talking about it.
I want to ask you about that because it is unusual to have co-workers reading your book in such detail. Like, normally for me as an author, when I send my book to a publisher or when I was querying, I could rest in the knowledge that if they hated it, I probably would never have to see them or interact with them ever again. But your first readers and your publisher are your co-workers. So what is it like to share your work with them?
It's terrifying. Rise and Shine is the second on a 2-book contract. So when Love and Other Puzzles, which was the only one I had written, when that got submitted by my agent around, it went under a pseudonym or just kind of no name attached. And I think I joke and say, that's because I didn't want people to reject it based on my relationships with them. But I think, it also protected me in a way, I felt, because it feels quite like bolshy to make something and go, I think this is worthwhile of people's time and people should pay me money to do this. It feels like a weird thing. So I feel like that protected me slightly in that sense. I guess I also am quite good friends with most of the people. Like, I love Catherine Milne, my publisher, as a colleague as well as a friend, and I value her opinion so much that I think I would be, I mean, that's what you want from your publisher, don't you? Whether you have that friendship or not. So that, to me, I'm constantly worried about letting her down and my agent by not being better, because I know that they hope for these things for me. Also, just slightly off to, I did write another book, which was supposed to be the second book in that contract, and I sent it to my agent, who said very lovely things, and then she sent it on to my publisher, and then my publisher managed to pretty much ignore me for 6 months on that, which is very hard for her to do, because we're almost daily contact with each other. So I knew that that was not the best sign when you're waiting that long for a structural report to come back. So, I mean, I think that was probably worse for her than what it was for me. I tried to be very nice to my publicist and my marketer. I know that it's not always the easiest job, and we're often dealing with people that are quite anxious because their babies are going out into the world. And so I try to keep all of that in, because I want to make their jobs as easy as possible. So look, I don't know. We'd have to ask Taylor and Kate and Catherine how I am to deal with, largely. But it's also part of the reason why I wanted an agent, even though I know a lot of people. I wanted that distance. I didn't want to have all those conversations myself necessarily all the time.
I can see how you'd want to have that little arm's length. But then again, I've had the chance to talk to Catherine, and she strikes me as that sort of like perfect teacher person who is so encouraging, but you would know when you have not pleased her. But the good news is that I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of your book, and it has a bit of a different cover to what's actually been published. And it's full of rave reviews from everyone at HarperCollins about the book. And it's got this big headline that says in-house staff favorite, which I think is a great sign. But what I really loved was your publisher's letter on the inside cover. And we've spoken about Catherine Milne. She's the head of fiction at HarperCollins, and definitely a superstar when it comes to publishing. You know, her list includes like Holly Ringland and Trent Dalton, so big names. But in the letter to readers in your book, she writes, as a publisher, you live for the moments when your authors surprise you, when their work, their effort, and dedication to the craft pays off, and they create something that you weren't expecting, something true, something heartfelt, and entirely original. Rise and Shine was one such surprise. I mean, how did it feel when you read that? But I can imagine what your answer is going to be. So a second part to my question is that I think Catherine there is talking about you finding your voice in this book. And voice can be such an elusive concept, but one that authors and publishers talk about a lot. So how would you describe your voice in this book, and how did you go about finding it?
Yeah, look, I would love to give a very academic and helpful answer to that. And I can't, because it's just how that came out. When I got such lovely words from Catherine, yes, I practically cried. Just the relief, really, because it is quite hard to write a book. And I felt, especially with this one, that I had just put so much of myself into it. I will preface that also by saying my partner and I are totally fine. And we have no issues. Pete has nothing to worry about. So there was an extreme amount of relief that was there. Also because, and I think this is also what she means when she's coming back to voice, is that when Love and Other Puzzles, my first novel, it was so plot based and it was set within a week, and I had to really, I was hitting certain tropes because it was down the line, I think, rom-com, and so you need to have certain elements in there, I think, otherwise people get disappointed. I had to break everything down almost before I could start writing. And I didn't do that at all with Rise and Shine. But that's because, I mean, things happen in it, but it is so much of the everyday. For me, it's more of just that character study. And I felt the pressure of that so much more, because I thought it really does rely on voice. Because if you don't care about those characters, you will not like the book. It's only really about August and Noah. And that was so, so important. But it's just how it comes out. I can't control it. I feel so much better for it. I knew when I was writing it even when I wrote like the first couple of thousand words and just dropped it in a body of an email, which is not the first 1,000 words in the book, and sent it to Catherine while I was still waiting on the structural for the other one. And I said to her, this actually feels quite good. And she was like, yes, this is great. I think this is actually the next book that we'll publish. And I'm like, good-o. This is all I've written and there's not much time to write the rest. But that made me go, oh, good. I know what I'm doing here in that voice sense. And it makes me feel a lot better because I've got to work on the next book, which is due at the end of this year. And I feel like I've found myself in that because, like you've said, voice is so important. I think we could all probably sit down and work out exactly how to write a sentence and what needs to happen. And I think if you read enough books, you could probably write one. You know when something's working, you know when something's missing. I think it becomes just something you have inside you. But if you don't have that voice, I don't know whether that can be a learnt thing. Do you know what I mean? Have you found
I
that?
do know what you mean. Yeah, I think it's part instinct and it's a combination of your point of view of the world generally, whether you're an optimistic person, whether you have a good sense of the absurd, which is the things that I think that come through in your book. But I think it's also then about really deeply accessing your own internal monologue, which we all have running all the time, and slightly skewing it to suit a particular character, and then really noticing in fine detail the generalities of life. And that's what I really took from this book. And I want to talk a little bit more specifically about the story. And when I was reading the novel, what really struck me is how many love stories do begin at the beginning, the falling in love part where everything is new and exciting. And few books focus on that messy middle where familiarity has well and truly set in, but Rise and Shine certainly does. What made you want to focus on the second act of a marriage?
Honestly, I just find relationships so interesting. For myself, I love to read like a marriage story. I did think, and I feel like I know a few people these days, and I won't name any names, and some who I've found more of this stuff out since having written the book, that are just kind of getting to that point where they start being like, this is good, but is it good enough? That life is long, but life is short. And is this it forevermore? And I think you can end up asking yourself those questions, and you should, whether you're in a relationship or not. Probably also because I'm 41 now, but 40 around when I was kind of doing Rise and Shine. I think that midlife crisis time is also when people start questioning things. And I think some people started questioning them around COVID, when everyone was kind of stuck with their partners with little break in between. So I just found all of that very interesting. And I also thought it would be quite a big challenge, and a big challenge to write something where I wanted everyone to really be a good person. I didn't want anyone to be the villain in it. I didn't want the end of the marriage to happen because someone had cheated or because somebody wanted children and then didn't want children and then there was a resentment. I didn't want any of that kind of stuff. I didn't want them to have children. I mean, I have 2 small children. They're great. But I think that's a different story. That's the story of when your life becomes life admin and less about a relationship itself and what you personally want. You can think when you have children, oh, gosh, I wish I painted more, but I'm so busy with the kids and everything. That's a completely separate thing to when August is like, actually, I could be doing this and I'm not. And why is that happening? Look, it was not the easiest idea of mine to come up with when I first pitched it to my agent, because I had a couple of more traditional rom-com ideas as well. She said, oh, Kimberly, I just don't think people break up because of stuff like that. And I thought, oh, I really think that they do. And having spoken to quite a few people since the book's come out, but I think it's good. It's an empowering thing, not necessarily breaking up with people, but it's good to ask yourself those questions.
And it's a real contemporary phenomenon, I think, for women in particular, to have the freedom to ask themselves that. And something I have noted is how interesting it is that you didn't rely on those traditional tropes that would normally cause a marriage to fail. Some of them you mentioned, like adultery, financial pressures, the kids, etc. There's nothing specific, but just a general sense of ennui, specifically for August initially, but then also for Noah. And in the book, August says, home is fine, work is fine, Noah is fine, painting occasionally is fine. The only thing that isn't feeling fine is how I feel about all the fine. And then she goes on to say, fine feels a lot like settling, that thing we all said in our 20s that we'd never do. And what if the person I'm settling for is this version of myself? So that sentence and that idea really is a core theme of the novel. And we do see it in a couple of ways. One is that August has these artistic ambitions that she's not fulfilled because she's got her hands full running the bakery that she owns. But Noah is also frustrated. He works in a podcast studio, but he really wants to write and release music. And I suppose the big question, and the one they have to answer for themselves, is, are they unhappy with each other or unhappy with themselves?
I absolutely agree. And I think it's because they are reaching that point. Obviously, Noah's a little slower off the mark with that. No offense, men. I think most of them aren't maybe as self-aware when that kind of thing is happening. Look, I love August and Noah both. I root for them the whole time that it's happening. But I do feel like, as hard as it is to break up, August, in a way, I feel like is blaming Noah and the person that she's with for these things that she could have possibly done while keeping on in the relationship. Like he has not stopped her from painting at any point. I think maybe she's just a little bit concerned that everything is too comfortable and it's just too comfortable to be with him. And without that shake up, this will be what forever is. I don't want to spoil anything, but I think it's a very good thing for him in the end, because I think he has lost himself so much. He was in the band, they nearly made it, they want to do that. I think we all get to that point where we were these people in our early 20s and we totally forget what those people wanted, and often until it's too late. And then you have those regrets that you didn't do. I feel like, in a way, and this might be, am I more of an August than a Noah? I don't know. Where I feel like he's lucky that August kind of did the hard thing, which is having that conversation for him. Otherwise, I don't think that anything would have changed for him ever, I don't think. And so I think he's very lucky in that having happened. This is another thing that I thought was interesting. I know many people that have been in very long-term, since high school relationships. And I wonder, how is it possible that you could have grown at the same rate and the same time as somebody else? Part of this book is also, once the breakup happens, whether or not they can grow to be the people that they need to be, not just for themselves, but also for the other person again, and whether they have that. I mean, I do intend on staying with my partner for a very long time. We have been together for 10 years, but do people grow at that same rate?
I think it's a bit of luck and a lot of hard work and the capacity to pursue some things independent of each other. But I think that a long-term marriage is a choice that you make every day to be in it. And it's not always an easy choice to make. There's a lot of sucking things up and sacrificing. But I think, just personally, at the end of the day, I think of what my life would be like without my husband, and I look at my life with my husband and I know which one I'd really prefer. But August is not in my camp. Like, she really needs to go and explore the alternative. And the other thing that really does bind me and my husband, and it's a wonderful thing, is our children. Yeah. And so I did find it really interesting that you chose to withhold children from August and Noah. They're childless or child-free by choice. And I imagine that you thought about that quite a lot. And, as August says, if you're a woman and you don't have children, you must be in want of them. No one will hear anything different, and anything you say to defend your position will only sound to them like excuses for your faulty ovaries or womb or heart. It's interesting because Noah and August both like children. And in Noah, I see a lot of childlike qualities. So why don't they have children?
A little bit like what I was saying before, in that I feel like that's a completely different marriage story. And then I think there's more of a financial thing with having children as well, and more of like a custody, and there's other people to be factored in. I don't think you have as much time to look at yourself. Also, I know many amazing women who are child-free by choice, and I don't see their stories so much in fiction. I feel like I read a lot of stories where it's like 20-year-old women and they're trying to sort out what they're doing. So kids don't really factor into that so much because you're young and free and enjoying yourself. And then it tends to be, yes, then stories when it's women that are in their mid to late 30s and then over, everyone seems to have children. And I can't think of that many books where people don't and are happy with that. And I wanted to celebrate those amazing women that I know, who I am often quite jealous of, as much as I love of my children. I think it's important to have those stories out there. They like children too. They just don't want to have any of their own. Like, they want to travel. They want to stay out on a school night and do all that kind of stuff. And I think that that's really important. But yes, once again, I think that just becomes a completely different story. And I know a lot of people as well. I mean, it sounds like I know a lot of sad people, and they're not all sad. But people that have staying together for children, they like each other fine. I think settling is a different situation when you have young children with someone. I know people these days who financially can just not afford to have two houses and pay a mortgage and rent and everything at the same time. I think you have less freedom. I read something recently. Lots of people now are getting divorced in their mid 40s, mainly women pushing that. And I'm sure that's part of anyone that had children in their 20s. Now those children are like, well, maybe not out of home in this economy, but less reliant on them for everything. And I'm sure that's factoring into those divorce rates. There's that old one where the old saying where you stay together for the children and until people finish school. But yeah, so once again, I just think that's a completely different. I have a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. So I'm around kids all the time. Maybe it's a nice break for me to write a book about people that don't have children.
Moving on, I want to talk a little bit more about the writing at the line level, because that really is the shining strength of this book. And what really hit me is that there's no pedestrian or mundane placeholder sentences, and many of the paragraphs and sentences have a feel of a story within themselves. And I just want to give a small example. This next bit is from Noah's point of view, and it's a chapter where he's psyching himself up to compose some music and write a song. And you write, Noah's inspirational jottings had started being compiled on the Notes app on his phone and had migrated to the back of a cigarette pack receipt, which was definitely his last pack, unless August was in earshot, and then he'd quit smoking 5 years ago. And besides the occasional cigarette bummed late into a wedding reception, he hadn't touched one since. So that is one sentence, and I counted it up. It's nearly 60 words, which is incredible. But it tells us so much about Noah. It points to his immaturity in some ways in his relationship with August, because he's hiding the cigarettes, and also the literally fragmented nature of his musical ambitions. Is that the style of writing that you were aiming for? And is it the style of writing that you enjoy reading?
Once again, I think that's almost unconscious voice that I have. And you can probably tell from talking to me, I can be quite rambly and things will run on. I know all my sentences run on. Well, not all of them. Some are very short, not many. And I felt so bad for my editor, Madeline James, who's also amazing. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's just going to keep, like, she's really going to have to fight all her urges to break my sentences up. I really appreciated that my publisher, Catherine, who we've spoken about, said, just leave Kimberly's run-on sentences. That's just part of the beauty of the voice of the book. So they have to stay. So I mean, I feel very bad about I can't stop it. I'm sure I reined it in more for Love and Other Puzzles. But I really like the rhythm of them. But I feel like they just have a nice cadence when they run on a little bit. And I think that's also, well, for me, that's how I think. I love books like ones by like Anne Tyler where the sentences really pack a punch, and I think there's a lot in them. And maybe if I was a better writer, I would get a lot more in with less words in my sentences like her.
I'm wondering, are you a note taker? How do you record this sort of fine observation of life? Or you are just incredible at remembering and that you can really place yourself in a situation when you write?
Oh, look, I'd like to say that I'm very incredible. Look, like sentences and certain words will just come to me. And like Noah, I put a lot of things in my notes app. Right now with the book that I'm currently writing, it's like 30,000 words on my notes app, and then I have to send them to my email. But that's also because, when a good idea comes to you or a sentence, you have to get that down straight away. I do not have an amazing memory. I feel like I'm quite good at putting myself in situations, and like most writers, I probably pick up a lot more than what I even realize at the time until you need to access that. When I die, if my phone is just found by someone, they will go, this woman is insane, because there are all these notes where it'll be like, and it will just be a sentence, probably quite a long one. And then from that sentence, I'll be like, that's what this chapter is. That's what I've realized I'm trying to say in this. Because also, Rise and Shine was completely written out of order. So I had no plotting. I knew how it was going to end. I didn't know the scene in which it was going to end, but I knew where August and Noah were going to end up. Everything else was just written based on a mood, and then that mood would become a chapter. And then I had to fill everything in afterwards when I was like, oh, that's probably enough. Now I need to work out what's missing and whether any of this makes any sense.
Sort of puddle of words that you then had to mold into a coherent shape and story?
Pretty much, because I'm not very good with being vulnerable or tapping into my own emotions. And I felt like I needed to really do that for Rise and Shine. So I really had to use what I had at the time. So if I was feeling sad about something, I would be like, oh, this is when I will start writing. And then I would have a sentence, and then the rest would kind of flow. And I'd just try and use all of that in the time. But that doesn't work in a linear sense if you're writing. Then I'd be like, oh, well, if I've done this, then this next bit happens, or this has to come now. And I would just kind of work through that way. But there are bits like, even I guess the first bit I wrote is when you meet Jasper, who lives next door to August Bakery, and just that scene of them, like Noah wasn't even in that. So then I had to be like, where is Noah? How are we doing that? And then going back and forth. It's not a clean way of working at all, but I think it's worked this time. But I think that's also, and the notes app, and I sound like a very chaotic person, and maybe I'm just chaotic in this way. I swear I'm not normally chaotic in my day job. I don't sit down every day and write, so I just need to make the most of the time when it comes to me. I don't like to force myself, which is not ideal with deadlines, because I feel if I'm not in it mentally in that moment, I won't be happy with anything that I've done. And then I'm less likely to want to come back and do it the next day. I guess is that like a mood writer? I don't know. Am I making up a term? I probably. Are you a plotter?
Yeah, a bit of plotting and a bit of pantsing, but I'm finding it so interesting you describing this because it sounds so different to the way you organized your first book, which
Yes.
I've heard you say was very well plotted out because it took place over 7 days and it had to be very structured. But I'm wondering, given that you are a mood writer, let's make that a thing, and you have a busy full time job, you've got kids. So when does the bit of typing it into the computer happen?
When I got Rise and Shine and the proof copies and then the finished copies arrived, I was like, how did I actually do this? I don't know. Also, my partner, he's a paramedic. So he's a shift worker. And so he is gone kind of 4 out of every 9 days because it's a rotating roster. I don't have weekends necessarily because it could just be me with the girls. And I can't have a thought around my children. They're not of an age where that's possible. It is a lot of early mornings. When it's summer in Brisbane, at 4:30 in the morning is sunny. So if Pete isn't at work, he has to wake up at like 3 a.m. to go. So I can get in if he wakes me up at the same time until the girls wake up at 6. And then, how it's school and feeding and work. And my brain stops working at the end
Mhm.
of the day. So I can't really do anything then. So it's just kind of slotting that stuff in when I can, always being in a constant panic because I haven't done enough. I don't know why I'm doing it to myself. I spend every moment being like, I should be writing. I should be doing something else. The notes app on my phone, I feel is really doing the heavy lifting, especially with the new book, because I can have the 2-year-old asleep next to me and I can be typing out, like I said, maybe like 30,000 words in bits on my phone, and then I can email that to myself, and then I can drop it in the Word document, and maybe I'll add more into it. I don't know. I mean, I have to at some point. I've only done 30,000 words, really. I admire everyone that can sit down every morning. I also don't like working outside in cafes. I don't like
Mm.
outdoor noise. I'm very jealous of people that can block that out or that feeds them. I can't even have music on when I'm writing. I just like complete silence. I'm probably talking to myself the whole time.
It's interesting the process you describe. I can see a lot of merit in it because it, in some ways, alleviates the pressure of writing a book because there's nothing more stressful than sitting down to a blank page and feeling that
Yes.
you have to come up with something. And so the way you're doing it is that you're fitting it into your life. And I think it's a great example to people who say, oh, I don't have time to write a book. Well, if you're doing it the way you're doing it, there is always time, but it's damn hard work. Just earlier you mentioned Jasper, who's one of the support characters in the book, and I wanted to talk briefly about them. We've got Regina, who's the older pottery class acquaintance who gives August a dog. We've got Mary, the funny and frank best friend. There's Adam, who's Noah's longtime childhood friend who's battling cancer. Jeff, the slightly wild but grammar obsessed muso co worker with whom Noah wants to start a band. And then there's Jasper, the neighbor who is quietly in love with August, and he's an architect. And he comes over to see her in the wee hours of the morning while she's making bread, and he draws her and only her. I have to say, I fell a bit in love with Jasper, and I was a bit frustrated that August couldn't see it. And I'm wondering, what do you think about my idea of giving Jasper his own novel?
Look, I am probably more than a little bit in love with Jasper. I think he's wonderful. I love that idea. I love that idea because I would love to spend more time with him. I don't know whether August does completely not know what is going on or whether it's just easier for her not to acknowledge that thing, because if she acknowledges it, like she likes Jasper, they're friends, they obviously care for each other a lot, him in of a more a romantic sense, but he also, I think, knows he never says anything to her necessarily. I think he knows that if he acknowledges it, it could also ruin this lovely thing that they have at the same time. One of the school dads, he had read the book and he was like, "Oh, I feel like Jasper's a bit like pathetic." And I was like, "I don't think Jasper's pathetic. I think Jasper is very happy. He has a lovely house and a job that he loves and is obviously very good at. And he has good friends and he does quite well with the ladies. It's not like he's just waiting for August and not doing anything else. It's that I think, and there are probably men that I knew more in my 20s and less so now, but it's almost easier for them to love someone that is practically unattainable. They don't have to worry about getting attached or rejected or anything else with other, loves or likes or whatever else down the track. I think life can almost be easier that way. And I doubt those men are making it as a conscious decision. But I think Jasper's probably more thoughtful than most other people, though. And I was very happy. I don't think this is a spoiler at all. When I decided that he would become friends with Noah, that felt like a very nice thing to do. Maybe, I mean, not nice to make it happen by him hitting Noah with his car, but that felt like a nice thing. Once again, I didn't want it to be like, oh, he hates Noah because Noah is with August and has all of this going on. It's like, you can just be a good person. You can be friends with someone and then in love with someone at the same time and still have those connections. Yeah, I really didn't want bad guys. I love Jasper a lot. People have asked who I could see playing him, and I have no idea.
When I visualize him, I visualize like an Eric Banner
Oh, do
kind
you?
of guy, sort of hot, older
Definitely hot.
looking guy. Yeah. Like respectful but sexy and there's such lovely tension in his unrequited love for August. But it sounds like Jasper's not going to be exactly the focus of the next book. And you've spoken a little bit about what you're working on. Can you tell us anything about it? Will it be more in the style of Rise and Shine or Love and Other Puzzles or?
It's certainly the voice and everything will be in the style of Rise and Shine. It's set in Brisbane again. It is about two couples and they have children of differing ages and they went to university together. And now we're kind of 20 years down the track. And it's also got publishing in it and unrequited love situations and a little bit of tension, maybe a little affair. I don't know. It is different. I still think I will hopefully end up in the same situation of Hope, but once again, more of that character based thing where I think, yeah, people trying to find themselves and working out what they're doing. And it's quite fun, at least writing some of the publishing stuff that's in it. Catherine, the main person, who is not my publisher, works at a publishing house doing editorial stuff. So there's some fun jokes to be had. It was so nice writing about Brisbane and I love it. And I just, right now, I cannot imagine writing about anywhere else.
It is in some ways the unsung literary city of Australian fiction. And I think Trent Dalton actually has done a lot of good work in this regard to really spotlight the city because, it does have such a fascinating climate. It's a subtropical climate. So the extremes and the power of the weather up there is quite intense. And it felt like, again, a very deliberate choice to set Rise and Shine there. And you use that passing of weather to sort of reflect the passing of time in the book as well.
Once again, thank God for amazing editors, because as you can tell by my mood writing, sometimes they were like, is this the right season that we're in now based on what you've done this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you must hate me. I'm so bad. I'm so bad at it. Because I had been in Sydney for maybe 12 years. And now I work remotely from Brisbane and tour and everything as normal. I had lived in Brisbane for 10 years beforehand. I grew up on the Sunshine Coast, so still in Queensland, only an hour away, and made all those bad decisions with men in bands in my 20s in Brisbane. There was like a nostalgia to coming back as well as coming back in a completely different age group and kind of discovering it again and kind of just falling back in love with it in a way that I just didn't appreciate, obviously, when I was in my 20s and being an idiot. I feel like that really helped. Like I could see the beauty in this town that I do love. And I feel like your eyes start to skim over stuff if you're used to it all the time and
Mm.
you don't notice that as much. I remember when I wrote Love and Other Puzzles and I had to add so much stuff in later on because the scenery wasn't there and that was set in Sydney. And I feel like it's just because I'd become used to Sydney again. I could see it all in my head, but it wasn't necessarily coming out on the page. And I think going back to Brisbane, and we've been there for maybe 2 years, I was noticing all those things again. I was noticing the sweat and the flowers and the sun. And I had forgotten how much I love the summer storms that we have up there and the lifestyle of it all. Now that I'm kind of dissecting it, I'm slightly concerned that I'll become complacent again in the new one. Brisbane is the best, yes. Trent's doing very good work for Brisbane, and Bluey is doing very good work for Brisbane as well. It's funny, I'm working on Trent's new book, and so I've read it, and it's amazing, which will be no surprise to anyone, and set in Brisbane as well. But we both have Noah's drinking in the same pub, and I thought, when was the last time this pub has ever been in literature? And then like twice in 1 year, and with the same publisher, like quite obviously we didn't talk about any of that stuff beforehand. So that felt very, very funny.
As you might know, there are a lot of authors and aspiring authors who listen to Talking Aussie Books, and we normally ask our guests to offer their best writing tips. But because of your special position within the industry, I'm wondering if you could give some advice more specifically around publicity. What kind of author do you try to be when you're working with an in house publicist? And what, in your opinion, makes an author good to work with?
Look, I love all my authors that I work with. Like I was saying earlier, I feel like I've got more empathy than I ever had before in my role, in how vulnerable you feel when you're putting yourself out there and your book is going out into the world. And I know how much time it takes to write a book and how exhausting it is, and how for most of us, it is being the writing is happening in those small cracks in your day. And so you just want the best for your book, and you obviously want as many people to read it as possible, because that's how we get to keep writing the books. If the sales aren't there, that becomes a lot harder, and it's a tricky market at the moment. I just trust that everyone that I'm working with knows what they are doing and are very good at their jobs. I know I will have been pitched out in a publicity sense to many, many places. And I also know that a lot of media, and the media is shrinking in Australia in terms of who wants to talk, especially with fiction. And I know lots of people don't come back to emails like in the media, and they just ignore everything. And so I don't ask any follow-up stuff. I don't check on what anyone's doing. I know that they will have, and I don't want to put someone in a position of having to be like, no one cares. It's just so tricky at the moment. Like we only really
Yeah.
have two physical papers in a sense, or like three maybe these days that do reviews. I think the market now, and I'm not surprised, is so much more just word of mouth, and we can only do so much. So there's the advanced reading copies and the proofs that go out, and we do all of that, and we, try and get people out there talking, and we're talking about books for a very long time in advance so that people actually read those books when they get sent out. Then there's kind of like, there's such an element of luck in a way. Like people just need to love it and connect with it. And they also need to be the kind of people that will tell 10 other people that's happening. And then those people will need to hear it from 10 other people before they go out and buy it. For me, all I'm ever trying to do is try and set things up and lay the foundations so that when, and hopefully that happens, we're all in the best position for it. It's not something that can be manufactured, that word of mouth. And I think like I will absolutely buy books that I have heard that people I like really trust their opinions of have bought. And I would buy that book over one that I read a positive review about from someone I don't know who doesn't know what I like to read. I love working with authors. Once again, I love all my authors who listen to what I say and trust me to do my job. But also, I'm always very happy to talk about how the market is going or what's happening. So I think everyone should feel like you can have those conversations, but it is very hard at the moment. I think the cost of living is not helping a situation as well. And then you go, wow, we are asking people to spend $35 on something where they don't know whether they're going to like it or whether it's a good thing. So I'm not surprised that people just keep going back to, say, buying a James Patterson, where they're like, oh, I've read 10 of those already. I know what I'm going to get. And that's kind of a comfort thing, and that can be worth my money. I'm at that stage, and maybe that's just how I have to be in terms of a mental health stage, where I feel like from a writing sense, I just want to keep getting better and I want to love what I'm doing. And that's the most that I can kind of do. Everyone just needs to focus on writing the best books possible, because at the end of the day, it might not sell those 50,000 copies that it should sell, but we just don't have that reading market in Australia. So that's what I do. And I also don't go on Goodreads, and I don't look at any reviews. I don't put my name in Google, because I find the reviews where someone's like, that person's annoying, they will stick with me, and I will be in a bad mood for 3 days, when you could have read 10 other reviews that were all like, oh, I love this, I love August and Noah. And they kind of, you're like, oh, that's great. And you move on. And I can't move on as easily from bad reviews.
Are you a proponent of being really active on Instagram and Facebook or TikTok? Or
if you're good at it and it's something that you would like to do, then you should absolutely do that. I am too old for TikTok, so I will not be on TikTok doing any of that. I am definitely an Instagram person, but I don't post that often. I have obviously been tagged and I will share a lot of things. I also feel like because I don't post that often, I don't want to go on about the book too much on it, because that feels like a sell, and that doesn't feel like a genuine thing for me to be doing. But the Bookstagram and author community is amazing on Instagram, and I've met a lot of really great people who have become friends in real life from that. So I think that is worthwhile. And I've been contacted by people where I've been like, oh, I didn't even know that we followed each other. And they've been great, and they've been incredibly, incredibly helpful. And so I think there's a really great community there for that. But I think if it's not for you, and then you're only going to post when you're trying to sell a book and it's just the covers of the book, that to me is not ideal, and that's not building the kind of community that can work for you if that's something you're inclined to do. But I also get sometimes quite concerned when I see authors who I know are on a deadline and are spending a lot of time on Instagram. And I go, the book needs to be the more important thing. Like, absolutely promote, have that link tree, support the bookshops you love, support other authors you love, pay it forward, do all of that stuff. But also you need to write a book. So that needs to be where the focus is.
I think that's probably a perfect note to end our chat today. What I'm taking from that is that focus on what you can control, and what you can control is the writing and the words that you put down. And in the case of your book, Rise and Shine, you've done a beautiful job in that regard. So thank you so much, Kimberly, for joining us today on Talking Aussie Books. And I really hope the book flies.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm such a fan of your books, Cass.
That's it for this episode, folks. Hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If so, I'd love it if you'd leave a review on your preferred listening platform, which may include Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Until next time, friends, happy reading!